In 1982, Namco finally released their true sequel to Pac-Man with Super Pac-Man. And while it has its fans, myself included, it ultimately failed to live up to the critical and commercial success of its two main predecessors. The biggest reason for this failure was likely the big change in gameplay. Rather than eating dots and dodging ghosts, Super Pac-Man sees you picking up keys to unlock gates so you can eat the maze's fruits, with this super pellet letting you tear through everything you can within a time limit. It's not a complete departure, but needless to say, it lacks what made the original game so addicting and satisfying. So, what is the next logical step for Namco to make following Super Pac-Man's commercial failure? Make a sequel, of course! Introducing Pac Pal, Namco's 1983 follow-up to Super Pac-Man. Honestly, I have no idea what made Namco decide to iterate on Super's ideas rather than returning to something more reminiscent of the original game, but considering the game did have a lot of solid ideas, maybe a sequel was just what it needed to reach that critical success. Does Pac Pal manage this feat, or is it another mostly forgotten flop? Let's find out. As usual, I'll start with the intermissions. Oh, right. There are none. Huh. I kind of understood the lack of cutscenes in Baby Pac-Man, as that game was clearly lower budget and running on weaker hardware. I've heard that it's basically running off of a modified ColecoVision, but Pac Pal doesn't really have an excuse. Similarly to Super, you get a bonus round every few levels, but that game managed to have bonus rounds and intermissions, so I don't see why Pac Pal can't. I really can't wrap my head around this. Intermissions have been a basic feature of every Pac-Man game up to this point, with only one single exception, and for Namco themselves to release a sequel that's completely missing them just doesn't make any sense to me. According to the cutting room floor, there are a couple of unused sprites that show a lump growing out of a ghost's head, so maybe these were part of a planned intermission that never got finished? I don't know. Considering that this game introduces a brand new character that looks nothing like the established Pac people, some cutscenes explaining her role in the Pac-Man universe would have been very much appreciated. Speaking of which, meet Miru. Or...
Mill is taking your fruit!
Yeah, I'll stick with Miru. Anyway, the Pac-Man fan wiki declares her as a ghost, but I can't find any source for this information, and I don't personally see the resemblance. Being the titular pal, she helps Pac-Man clear mazes by bringing fruits to the ghost cage, which counts as progress through the level. Don't worry though, she's safe.
I'm good.
See? I really like Miru's design, she's cute. The sprite work in general is all really well done, just like the last game. Oddly enough, the ghost's eyes are 1 pixel closer together in this game, like they were in Pac-Man Plus. Not sure why they chose to reuse those sprites instead of the ones from every other game, but whatever. Other than that, it mostly resembles Super Pac-Man in terms of visuals. However, this time around the maze walls never change color. It's a small thing, but I did appreciate the slight visual variety in the previous game, and I'm not really a fan of this pale yellowish color. The fruits have been switched up once again, with the cherry, strawberry, orange, apple, melon, and key all returning from the original game, with the key just being a type of fruit again, now joined by the new lemon and pineapple. Additionally, there are special fruits which power Pac-Man up by giving him the ability to attack 2 tiles in front of him with something based on the type of fruit he picked up. The Galaxian shoots out familiar tractor beams from Galaga, the car from Rally X spits out dirt from its home game, the trumpet blasts music notes that make the ghosts dance, and it's the cutest thing I've ever seen. The snowman fires an ice beam, freezing the ghosts in a block of ice, and the big Pac-Man allows Pac-Man to fire multiple smaller Pac-Mans to chomp on the ghosts. After clearing 3 rounds with the giant Pac-Man, you wrap back around to the Galaxian again, and it loops every 3 rounds. All of these different power-ups and attacks are functionally identical, but the visual variety of the different special fruits, attacks, and ghosts being stunned add a lot of charm to the game. This is the kind of detail that Super Pac-Man was lacking, so I'm glad to see that improved in the sequel. Each of these different attacks also have a unique sound effect, which all fit their visuals well, but spamming them can be a little ear-grating. The rest of the sound effects are pretty good, though much like the original game, I feel like the sound for eating a fruit is a little bit understated. It's a much bigger deal here, however, since eating fruit is like half of what you do in this game. Of course, you've surely noticed by now that this game actually features background music, for the first time in the series' history. Take that away, and it's pretty obvious why they went that extra mile for this game. So much of the game would feel empty and devoid of sound, with the silence only occasionally being broken by picking up a card or a fruit or something, so adding BGM was a no-brainer. As for the music itself, it's pretty good. I like the composition, but I can't help but feel that the main theme is a bit empty? Like, it's only 2 channels, one for the lead and one for the bass. And even then, during gameplay, the bass instrument gets cut off every time you pick up a fruit, and in the bonus round, the entire song gets completely interrupted by the sound effect that plays when you find a Miru or Blinky. I get that the arcade sound hardware was limited, but even if it got cut off sometimes, at the very least a noise channel for percussion would have been nice. I don't want to complain too much, as this is the first time the series has ever tried adding background music, and setting that standard is a big deal, but technical limitations do hold it back somewhat. As for the music itself, I quite like it. The main theme is pretty catchy, and I love how when you start a game, the intro jingle also acts as an intro to the song itself. Shame that it only plays at the start of the first round, though. While the loop is really short, the bonus round's theme is great, and so are the high score themes. All around pretty good stuff, though Namco's own Mappy, which had released a few months before this game, definitely has it beat in that regard. All that said, how well does Pac Pal follow up on Super Pac-Man's ideas? Well, for one, the whole super pellet thing is gone. So are power pellets for that matter, being replaced by the special fruit I talked about earlier. The core loop of grabbing keys to unlock gates is still intact, though with some minor alterations. This time, instead of picking up keys, you get cards, which will show you which fruit they unlock the path to. That fruit will also start flashing, further communicating to the player what to do next. This time, rather than clearing out a bunch of fruits from each pathway, with sometimes multiple keys being needed to fully unlock each pathway, now just one card will unlock every gate for the specific area where you can find just one fruit. This is a big improvement, as it means you'll almost never end up at a dead end, which could happen quite often in Super Pac-Man. That is, of course, with the noted exception of fruits located at the top of the maze here. They had the ability to completely remove dead ends from the maze design, and yet they chose to keep this in the game. Of course, this is often the hardest fruit to collect, and I've gotten killed in this spot several times. Dead ends in a Pac-Man maze are just flat-out bad design, and they were so close to alleviating that issue from the previous game, but they just had to add this one little area in here. Given that the power pellets and super pellets are both gone, the only way to defend yourself in this game is with the special fruits. Unfortunately, their attack range isn't the best, and unlike the super and power pellets, they don't make you invincible to ghosts, just blue. You're all but required to use one to get these dead-end fruits. That is, unless Miru decides to help out. See, she wanders around the maze looking for your fruits, and if you leave one unattended for long enough that she happens to walk by it, she'll take it and head towards the ghost cage with it. This helps you clear the mazes, as Miru isn't affected by the ghosts, so she can get to any fruit whenever she wants, so long as its gate is unlocked. Of course, there's a catch to this. If you get every fruit by yourself, you get a big perfect bonus, which increases in score the farther you get into the game. If Miru takes even one of the fruits to the ghost cage, you won't get this bonus, and will instead only get a bonus of 100 points per fruit that you got yourself. She can also take your special fruits, which can be extra annoying, especially in later stages when the difficulty ramps up. You can at least take the fruits back from her if you manage to catch up to her before she reaches the ghost cage though, so it's not that bad. You can even go into the ghost cage yourself, without the need for a super pellet or anything this time. Considering that it's gated off just like the areas with the fruits throughout the rest of the maze, it doesn't make much sense, but it is helpful, so I'm not complaining. The cards and the gates that they unlock are actually predetermined and change each level. There are a good few different layouts, but the fact that they're predetermined and there's no way around it like with the Super Pellet and Super Pac-Man means that Pac Pal is more of a game of memorization than anticipation and reaction like its predecessors. Some of these layouts are just really bad too, like this one where every single card is on the opposite side of the maze from the fruit it unlocks. As if that wasn't bad enough, the game also won't let you unlock any more fruit if you have 3 unlocked fruits on screen at once. You have to either go eat one of them or wait for Miru to bring one to the ghost cage before you can even unlock another one. Combine that with some of the more annoying card layouts and you end up going back and forth through the maze, and it gets pretty tedious. I really don't see the point of this feature. Like, if it's supposed to be for difficulty balancing, then sure, I guess it makes the game a bit harder, but not in a way that feels satisfying or fun like the difficulty balancing in the original game. It makes it harder in a way that's annoying, because it just means you're spending more time bumbling around the maze trying desperately to dodge ghosts. Speaking of which, the ghosts in this game act mostly the same as their Super Pac-Man counterparts. For example, they still briefly stop in place to indicate a switch between scatter and chase modes. Again, these sequels aren't nearly as well documented as the original game is, so I'm mostly going off my eyeballs here, but the Ghost AI does seem to have a bit more randomness than I'd like. Maybe not randomness, but their general movement seems off in this game. Like, Blinky will have a direct path towards me while chasing me down, but randomly decides to take a turn to some other path for seemingly no reason. Like, isn't he supposed to look like he's following directly behind me? Why does his pathing make him turn in situations like this? It just seems kinda weird the way the ghosts move in this game. They're also really aggressive, and it doesn't take long for them to start completely outspeeding you. Even trying to quickly corner away from them doesn't work, so the only safe space you have is this little orange box at the bottom here. In these orange tiles, as well as the 3 directly next to the exits, the ghosts move much slower than you do. This essentially acts as a replacement for the tunnels, which you'll notice are absent from this game. Leading the ghosts down here allows you to get a little bit of an advantage when they're getting too close for comfort, but honestly, the thing is so small that it hardly even makes a difference. Especially later in the game. You can lead them all down here and they'll still catch you immediately afterwards anyway. Not to mention the fact that it's still pretty easy to get sandwiched in here, not helped by the fact you can't even see where you're going. Seriously, whose idea was it to make this entire area in the center of the maze covered up? At least with the ghosts you can see their eyes and not lose track of them, but your sprite is just completely gone when you're in there. This honestly serves no purpose, and I have no idea what they were thinking with this. The overly aggressive ghosts do not pair very nicely with the game's maze design either. To its credit, it's better than Super's maze design, but Super also let you bypass half of its maze with the Super pellet, so that's not really saying much. It's similarly filled with long, narrow hallways, and while those hallways aren't as long as the ones in Super Pac-Man, it's maybe even more lacking in areas where you can quickly turn through diagonal pathways. Like I said, cornering away from ghosts isn't really an option here. Pair that with the occasional fruit locked in a dead end, and you've got a recipe for a pretty tough maze. Of course, the saving grace is this orange section at the bottom, but like I mentioned before, that has its own problems, so it's not really as much of a saving grace as it should be. This maze design just doesn't facilitate the core gameplay. When you haven't gotten many cards, there's very few avenues for escape, and by the time you have, the ghosts have gotten fast enough that the only place you can escape is through the orange part, which doesn't even help half the time. The difficulty balancing in general just isn't very good. The first 6 or 7 rounds are fine, but after that the difficulty spikes up so hard and so fast that you're not likely to make it much farther, unless you perfectly memorize every card layout and a good path through each of them. This game requires rote memorization more than any other Pac-Man game so far, whereas the previous games benefited from some memorization for very high-level players. Pac Pal damn near requires memorization to get any halfway decent score. This just isn't fun. The only thing I haven't mentioned yet are the bonus rounds, and really there's not much to say here. You run around grabbing cards, which will have one of 3 things: a $sign, Miru, or Blinky. The bonus round ends when you grab the Blinky card, and every card you get after finding Miru will be worth double the points. These are pretty much completely random, so depending on your luck, it can end on the last card you pick up, or the very first. These are okay, but the total reliance on luck just makes them not very fun or satisfying. Super's bonus rounds were much better. Before we wrap up, let's talk regional differences. Pac Pal was originally planned for a full North American release with a reskin as Pac-Man and Chomp Chomp, featuring Pac-Man's dog from the Hanna-Barbera cartoon. Unfortunately, Pac-Man and Chomp Chomp never made it to North America due to an oversaturation of Pac-Man games, and only got a very limited release of 300 cabinets across Europe in a somewhat incomplete state, as seen by the lack of any sprite art on the title screen, unlike the Japanese version. Chomp Chomp replaces Miru in this version, but otherwise acts identically to her. It makes a bit less sense for Chomp Chomp to go around stealing Pac-Man's fruits, but he's a dog, so whatever. As far as I know, this game doesn't have any gameplay changes between versions, and the little bit I played of Chomp Chomp felt exactly the same as Pac Pal gameplay-wise. I do like Chomp Chomp's sprites, they're cute and all, but I think I prefer Miru. She's just too adorable. Overall, Pac Pal is just a less fun variant of Super Pac-Man. It may be a bit more polished in some aspects, and the addition of background music is a big step forward for the series, but on the whole, the game just isn't that interesting. At best, it's just kinda boring, and at worst, it can be really frustrating to grind. The new mechanic of having Miru help you gather fruit is interesting, and the sort of balancing game you play with trying to keep your perfect score can be fun, but the whole card key concept on its own just doesn't really do much for me. The fact that it limits you to just 3 cards at once does nothing but make the game more tedious when you could otherwise be making progress, but are stopped from doing so for no good reason. The real nail in the coffin is the lack of evasive options and overly aggressive ghost AI. It is very easy to get sandwiched in this game, and only having 2 very limited power-ups per level, which are also locked behind cards by the way, doesn't give you enough of an advantage over the ghosts to facilitate player skill. This game is kinda okay, I guess, but it's definitely my least favorite game we've looked at so far, aside from Baby Pac-Man. Maybe it's slightly better than Pac-Man Plus, but I don't know, kind of a hard choice between 2 very mid games. That does it for this video. If you enjoyed the review, be sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel, and if you want to support me more directly, check out my Patreon. Thanks to my current patrons here on the screen, and thank you for watching. I'll see you all in the next video with Professor Pac-Man. Oh boy. Wish me luck.